Another week of Trap Talk here. Matt Johnson. We are now embarking on first ice. I'm getting reports in every day of guys out there on the ice catching fish, whether it be bluegills, walleyes, perch. Mr. Gens was out in North Dakota, slammed some fish. I know guys up in northern Minnesota, South Dakota, Michigan, northern Wisconsin, you name it. Anglers are starting to find opportunities to get on the ice and catch some fish. Today what we want to focus on is those pressured situations. Being a guide in the metro area here in Minnesota, the Twin Cities, my job oftentimes is finding fish on lakes that are heavily pressured. Pressure meaning lots of angler activity. So what are some things you can do as anglers, because no matter where you are, you're going to have bodies of water that see extensive amounts of pressure. You know, whether you're here in Minnesota, whether in Wisconsin, whether in the Dakotas, Iowa, Michigan, New York, whatever it might be, there are local lakes that are getting lots of traffic from anglers. So what can we do to increase our odds at catching more and better fish on these pressured lakes? So this is going to be pressured success on the ice. We're going to talk tactics, locational efforts, some gear choices, some of the presentations we use, give you an overall mindset to make you a better angler and be more equipped next time you hit the ice on these pressured situations. Because let's be honest, a lot of us reside in the city. We're going to be fishing area lakes that are close by. Closer to the city, you tend to have more fishing pressure. So this is an idea to give you an upper hand next time you hit the ice to catch more fish. Starting off, some simple ideas as far as location goes. I'm a firm believer that most of us drive by some of the best spots on the ice while we're ice fishing. We go right past them to the community hole, to the community spot. My words of encouragement here on these pressured area lakes are get away from the crowd. Use the crowd as a judgment tool or for where you should fish or likely areas where you should fish. The crowds, yes, they know where the fish are. I'm not going to tell you that these groups of fishermen that pop up in these shanty towns are not catching fish, that they're wasting their time, because I'm just going to shoot myself in the foot at that point, because they are catching fish. But I don't think they're catching the biggest fish in the system, and I think they're trying to all chase that exact same school. These fish have become routine to not bite or to bite at window periods. I call them window fish. They bite at certain periods of the day and certain periods only. We've all seen it when you get out there at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. You're playing cards with buddies until 4 because the bite doesn't even start. Sun hits the trees, wham, for an hour and a half, the bite's hot and heavy, and then it stops. These are window fish. They feed sparingly. One big tip I give you when these sorts of situations, if you're fishing spots where you have fish suspended in these deeper holes, where all these groups of fish houses are congregating, is look at the level they're coming in at. If you're in 30 feet of water and they're coming 10 feet off the bottom, go over to the nearest 20-foot mark. Basically, you can draw a straight line. Here's your bottom at 30 feet, 10 feet up where the fish are. That's 20 feet down. Go to the nearest 20-foot mark where the bottom is at 20 feet, and that's where your fish are going to reside during the daytime. So these fish are actually moving horizontally, not so much vertically. We all see on our locators, on our Vexilar flashers that, oh, the fish just showed up. I didn't see it rise, it just showed up. They're coming in, they're intercepting it at a level horizontally to where the bait fish are, the plankton or whatever they're feeding on. So they're going to literally slide horizontally to that first piece of structure, and that's what we're going to hold during the day. I've had some of my best success during light hours for crappies when they're normally suspending fish at twilight periods during the day at that same level they suspend out in open water. So keep an eye on where these fish are holding on these groups of shanty towns and these pressured lakes, and slide out these fish, whether it be 50 yards, 100 yards, 200 yards, 500 yards, whatever it might be. If large groups of fishermen are fishing a big basin, slide up on the nearest piece of structure. Like I said, we oftentimes drive past some of the most successful areas to catch fish. Weeds are another one. I'm a firm believer that a lot of your fish are going to hold on to weeds, especially if they're green. They're not going to leave them for most of the calendar period. I'm talking 12 months. You're going to have a lot of your fish relocate or locate throughout the calendar period on these green weeds, because like we talked about in the past, they provide numerous elements for success. Forage, comfort, oxygen, you name it. They have all these different variables so fish can stay in these habitats and thrive. So don't drive past green weeds. Be a go-getter and go chase the green weeds. So my big point of here with pressured area lakes, as far as where you set up locationally, is think outside the box. Break away from the crowd. Don't drive out onto the plowed road and go right to where the school of people are. Get away. Be that road person in the middle of nowhere where we always tell ourselves, I wonder what they're doing over there by themselves. 500 yards that way. You always wonder, now be that person, because oftentimes I can tell you from personal experience, they're on fish and they're on better fish. So break away. Use some of the tools we have. This happens to be an HDS-7 from Lowrance mounted on a blue box with a battery power. This allows me to be mobile with this system, similar to what you use in your boat. So I take my waypoints that I've had in the boat, marking my deep weed edges, isolated rock points, humps, saddles, whatever it might be, and I take this out with me on the ice. Like I said, break away. Find some of these isolated pieces of structure away from the crowd on these pressure lakes. Anyone can find a deep hole. Anyone can find a giant main lake point. But find these little depressions, these humps, these inside turns away from the crowd, maybe adjacent to these main popular spots, and I bet you get bit, and I bet you find bigger fish. So keep that in mind. Use these sorts of tools, whether it be a GPS unit like that, whether it be a paper map. We have 1-foot contour lakes, a lot of these pressured lakes. The good thing about these pressured lakes is that they're going to have usually high definition maps because they're the popular lakes. So you're going to have some of the best tools at your fingertips to find the desired depths, the inside turns, these isolated pieces of structure. So use these tools to your advantage to get away from the crowd and find your own fish. I can guarantee it's definitely going to pay off. Like I said, as far as location goes, be willing to move, be willing to run and gun, put some gas in the StrikeMaster auger and go. Punch some holes and find your own stuff. The rewards are well worth it. So location-wise, we got some of that nailed down. Again, that's just very, very minimal. Like I said, don't be afraid to contact me. If you have any questions on location, I'd be happy to answer an email or two. If you have a certain lake you're fishing, contact me, Matt Johnson at mattjohnsonoutdoors.com. You can email me there to get instant feedback. Moving on from location, moving on to some of your gear choices. We oftentimes ask ourselves, okay, pressured lakes, is there something I should be doing different as far as my presentation goes? That's an open-ended question. My answer would be yes and no. Start with what you have confidence in, no matter whether it's a pressured lake or not. Fish with what you have confidence with, and you're probably going to get bit on that. If fish come in and they're deterred away from your bait and they're not acting in a progressive manner, then start to switch things up. But I tell almost every angler I fish with is start with your confidence bait. Having confidence in whatever you're fishing is key. I could be fishing with 10 of my best friends. We all could have 10 different confidence baits. We all could be catching fish at the same time. But each individual has a mindset that that bait works for them or that presentation works for them. So stick with that and then deter and make changes from there. So what I like to talk about too is as far as confidence, and we talked a little bit about fish aggression and their mood. My mood indicator is my Vexilar flasher. This happens to be that double vision system, really hitting hot and heavy on the shelves this year. It's going to basically give you both options here. You have the Fish Scout underwater camera, and then you have the Vexilar flasher above it, all in one system, one battery power, not much heavier than your standard flasher. Now I have the ability to quickly jump down and see what's down there on my underwater camera. So being able to see on some of these pressured waters can help you determine whether you're chasing suckers or tiny perch or monster bluegills and walleyes. So we see fish on our flasher. Underwater cameras oftentimes can give us that awesome answer to what they are. You take away a lot of the guesswork. So flasher is going to be a mood indicator. This pays attention to where the fish are located, fish relation to your bait, how they're acting, returning to your bait, where your presentation is in relation to the fish. So these sorts of tools are a definite must, especially on pressured water. Not having underwater eyes, tools like these, you can waste a lot of time guessing that the fish are there. Like I said, we're fishing pressured water. Every piece of tool you can have to give you an upper hand is key. A flash unit, I think it goes without being said, is a big piece of the equipment, a big part of your arsenal to being successful on the ice. So you got zoom features on some of these units, you have flat screens on some of these units, you have a bunch of different features that can be more successful on the ice. So use these tools to your advantage when finding pressured systems. You also can use these tools to find weeds. I just talked about a few minutes ago about how important weeds are, green weeds. These tools are going to give you the ability to locate weeds. You're going to see faint signals off of the bottom. You're going to have your red bottom, you're going to have green and orange blips and scattered markings, maybe some red in between depending on how broad the cabbage leaves are or whatever type of cover you're fishing, but that's going to dictate weeds. You can then go to a low power mode with these Vexilar units and cut the wattage in half, allowing you to fish inside the weeds and still see your jig. A very, very important feature because in these pressured lakes, I'm oftentimes up inside weed beds, inside weed pockets, fishing the thick vegetation to where if you fish some of these other flash units, all you see is just clutter and a mess of junk that you can't even see your jig. You might as well put your flasher to the side. But these Vexilar units go from 400 watts down to 200 watts by switching to low power mode, which gives me the ability to cut down on the amount of weeds I'm picking up and see my jig. Other options that can help with that, the Tri-Beam from Vexilar has the 8, 12, and 20 degree, where when you switch to, say, an 8 degree, you're cutting down on how much cone angle, how much return you're getting back. So now you're cutting on this much area down to this much area, so you're not seeing as many surrounding weeds, which also give you an upper hand in the weed situation. So some of these tools that we have available to us also help us in fishing pressured waters. So again, outside of GPSs, flash units, underwater cameras, some of those tools, we're going to move on to rods, reels, tackle, line, those sorts of things that can give you the upper hand. Working at Thorne Brothers there in Blaine, Minnesota, and we know they're a custom rod shop. We can build any rod catered to your needs. So the pressured option is virtually endless. This rod in my hand, I'll start with larger game fishing going on. Fishing the metro area, my go-to tackle is going to be a 16th ounce buckshot rattle spoon starting off, and then I will adjust from there. 16th ounce seems to be a little smaller than normal for most of your walleye fishing, but like I said, we're fishing pressured lakes. I've had more success with a smaller profile jigging spoon than I had going bigger most often than not. And as you can see here, this rod happens to be a Perch Sweetheart. Yes, I said Perch Sweetheart, because as we know, these rods are going to be dictated towards the presentation you're using, not the name in the rod. The Perch Sweetheart happens to be my go-to walleye setup for about 95% of the situations, because I fish mostly 16th and 8th ounce jigging spoons, which is what this rod excels at. So it's going to be mostly like a medium light action combo. I got 5-pound P-line rigged on a 500 series Shimano reel. And actually, yes, I have a little spring bobber on the tip of that rod so I can see those light bites. Because when I'm chasing these walleyes on these flats with these 16th ounce buckshot rattle spoons, I'm also jumping in on perch, big bluegills, crappies that do not want to smack the bait. They want to come up and just tap it enough to where you see that spring bobber move, and you set the hook and you bring the fish home. So 16th ounce jigging spoons, a definite must if you're fishing pressured water. You can tip those with either a minnow head, a waxy Eurolarva, so you don't have to fish a chunk of meat, meaning a minnow, on jigging spoons. I've done very well fishing maggots. I also use a lot of Gulp and Gulp Alive products. Gulp Alive actually has a minnow head that works very well. I keep these in a pocket of mine when I'm hole hopping. I've had just as much success on this sort of product than using a live minnow head, pinched off, wherever it might be, on this sort of application. So 16th ounce jigging spoons, lighter than normal walleye setups, to match the presentation is going to give you an upper hand for chasing a lot of these pressured area walleyes. Moving down the line to your panfish, again, a lot of people are familiar with that power noodle. Very, very, very quick rod, very quick tip section, solid backbone. That's what we call it, the power noodle. Excellent option, our #1 go-to selling rod for panfish at Thorne Brothers. What I've done with this rod that seems to work a lot better in pressured situations is I'm hole hopping. And I'm hole hopping outside because I'm running and gunning after these pressured fish. So I took off the standard guides, which are the smaller hardloy type guides, and I put on titanium recoil spring guides, a larger diameter, wrapped them all the way to the tip. If you go to Thorne Brothers or call Thorne Brothers and ask for outside recoil guides, that's what you're going to get. Less freeze up, lighter weight, more sensitivity for hole hopping. And I've equipped this rod with a 500 series Shimano 3-pound P-line for detecting those light bites. That 3-pound P-line or 3-pound Northland line or whatever brand you're using works very, very well for catching a lot of various types of fish. So power noodle is an excellent option as a built-in spring bobber indicator. Again, you're talking about finesse applications, so you want that sensitive tip. Too stiff of a rod for panfish, you're missing bites. So this is going to be a visual appealing rod in that power noodle. Very, very effective, very, very popular option for a lot of fishermen. Moving on to the next option for sensitivity purposes is going to be your quiver stick. That's going to be a solid carbon graphite blank where the power noodle is fiberglass. This is going to give you the utmost sensitivity for detecting a bite. Again, I went with the recoil spring guides, outside guides, to give me the ability to hole hop and not freeze up as easy. One recent tool in modern ice fishing, I would say the last 5 years that has hit the industry by storm, is the advantage of going with a fly reel setup. Fly reels basically give you no line twist. And when we're dealing with finicky fish, big bluegills, slab crappies, jumbo perch, even walleyes, bass, trout, whatever you're fishing in some of these pressured walleyes, having the ability to have your line come up straight with no twist, because we know these weary bluegills do not want to jig that spinning, gives you a huge upper hand. Several of my setups have fly reels on them so that I can have that advantage when targeting these finicky fish on pressured water. So fill it with backing, put put 100 or so feet of your favorite line, no matter what it is, whether it's a Power Pro braid, whether it's a Bionic Ice, whether it's, you know, the new Floor Silk from Northland Tackle, P-line, Tri-line, whatever you might be using. Those sorts of lines work exceptionally well on these fly reels, so you can pick whatever you want. And I've seen everyone, like I said, use them from bluegills up to walleye. So the fly reel concept in the pressured area lakes, huge. I run that Ultimate Panfish League. It's a fishing league, and all of our bodies of water are in the metro area here in Minnesota. On every body of water we happen to fish is very heavily pressured. I think you're going to see probably 80% of the anglers in the UPL using fly reels because they drastically believe it gives them upper hand. I'm a believer myself. So that sort of setup works very well for pressured bodies of water to give you the line twist, to take that away, because spinning reels will omit line twist, drags, all those sorts of things, so keep that in mind. The next setup I want to show you is a short sight fishing rod, because if you can get away with sight fishing in these pressured lakes, it's probably going to be your best tactic for detecting a bite because you're visually watching when that fish takes it in. This happens to be a 19-inch Finesse Plus from Thorne Brothers. Another option is that 16-inch Sweet Pea. Both are going to be short. You're going to be over the top of your whole sight fishing. Equip it with the 500 series Shimano. It's balanced very well. Put some 2-pound or 3-pound line on there, and away you go. You know, very, very effective. Another reason for the short rod outside of sight fishing in pressured lakes is if you're on a hot bite, oftentimes you don't want the entire masses to know you are. So a shorter rod gives you the ability to hunch over a hole and hide almost your entire setup. You're not fishing longer rods, you're fishing here, you're fishing right here. When the fish hits, you set the hook, you reel them in, you let the fish back go without a lot of commotion. So very, very effective for a variety of reasons. So that just covered a few options as far as rods and line go. But again, your line's going to be huge. You're going to have to drop down to 2 and 3 pound test line for these pressured metro panfish, and you might have to drop down to 4 pound test or 5 pound test line for your pressured walleyes. You know, braids go very hand in hand, but don't be afraid to throw a leader on there. I've been using a lot of the Power Pro ice lines in the last couple of years. This is 5 pound blue, Glacier Blue. You know, it's very, very thin diameter. The 5 pound test line has a 1 pound test diameter. So it's very light, no stretch, very, very sensitive. So if you're targeting finicky fish that are slid off into deeper water, the ability to have the sensitive braid that does not stretch will give you more power on a hook set, more sensitivity to feel that bite so you're not missing it. Lots of variables in this line to be very, very successful on finicky and pressured bodies of water. So, and again, you can put an 18-inch monofilament or fluorocarbon leader on the end of this to get by if you're worried about line-shy fish. So you don't have to tie direct. I do on occasion, but you can use a leader material for these types of lines as well. So lines, rods, reels, sky is the limit. Those are just a few options to get you in gear for some of these pressured waters. Moving on to tackle options. Anyone who knows me knows I'm a big fan of artificial presentations. I use a lot of plastics on the ice, and especially when it comes to these pressured waters, I feel some of these finesse plastics that we have available to us nowadays are going to help you big time. They're not going to be moving like a wax ring to where your jig wants to twist. It's going to sit there. So whatever you do to this presentation is what it's going to mimic onto this bait fish, or prey fish, I should say. So plastics, as far as I'm concerned, there's a lot of them out there. The Northland line of plastics are awesome. Brian Rosal just spent some time with us at Thorne Brothers this past Friday for our Black Friday sale. I got a chance to talk with him. A big innovator in plastics when it comes to being revolutionary in the ice fishing world. He's come up with a whole line of bloodworms, scud bugs, slug bugs, you name it. The new line of Impulse Plastics from Northland. Very, very, very cool piece of a tool there. Going to be very, very supple, very small, scent impregnated. You're going to see a lot of anglers jump on these. I can tell you right now, working at Thorne Brothers, like I said, these shelves, these pegs are being stripped dry. The Impulse stuff is flying off the shelves. Those who have already been on the ice using them this year have reported back with awesome success. You need to try some of that stuff out. I plan to use a ton of it this year. Otherwise, as far as other plastics go, the Gulp Alive stuff, Custom Jigs and Spins makes some great plastics. Little Atom, J&S Plastics, I could go down the list and we could just hash them out. There's a lot of them out there. You know, Berkley has a whole new line of ice fishing jigs out there that are going to work very, very exceptional. But like I said, you know, starting with those Northland plastics, those usually be my go-to option, and I move forward from there. As far as color goes, jig type, I get away using a lot of size 10, 12, and 14 hooks for most of my pressured panfish. It is what it is. You have to deal with small gear. If you can get some of the tungsten options, that new Muska jig from Northland Tackle is going to be great. Otherwise, the Gill Getter, the Bro Bug, The mud bug, I've done very well in all those the last few years. They're actually some of my go-to options for catching a lot of your fish when it comes to using smaller profile jigs. Other tungsten options out there, Custom Jigs and Spins has got a couple tungsten options that are new this year. You got your Bentleys, you got your Fiskas, so tungsten you can get away with a smaller profile jig that fishes heavy for some of these pressured fish. But I do want to talk about the extreme opposite of these tiny finesse jigs. I've seen more often than not on these pressured body of waters to where if you go bigger, you get the fish to bite. Put this into perspective. If I'm looking for a meal, maybe I don't want a snack. I want to have one big meal and call it done. It sounds kind of corny because we're trying to give these fish human characteristics, but it's true. I've seen it most often than not where I'm fishing pressured fish. You throw everything but the kitchen sink at these fish, they do not bite. You drop down a Berkley 2-inch power minnow or Northland Tackle Mimic minnow, something bigger in profile. You drop it down over the face, you get them going, whack, they hit it like Mach 10 and just smack it. So a lot of times some of these pressured fish, especially the bigger fish in these pressured systems, are looking for 1, 2, 3, or 4 meals a day. They're coming in and they're gorging themselves on a group of pods of bait fish. They're taking hours of downtime. They're not just coming in and scalping up little plankton and insects. They were looking for a bigger piece of meat. So if you dropped on a bigger presentation for some of these fish, even in pressured situations, I know the norm is to go downsize when fish are finicky. But I encourage you to try the opposite. Be ready to be versatile on these pressured bodies of water. Don't just read a book and go out there and do exactly what that book tells you, because fishing is fishing. We've all seen it. We've all seen some very quirky and weird situations. And I can tell you, spending most of my time in the metro, that a lot of things that work are not written in books. You're thinking outside the box. You're trying stuff that's different. You're being a little more obscure on the color patterns you use. Black's a phenomenal color in pressured water, but one of the least talked about colors when you read magazines, watch fishing shows. It's glows, it's bright colors. For me, blood red, no glow, all black, purples, a lot of those darker colors that get better silhouettes seem to do better for me in pressured situations. To be honest, these fish have seen a lot of baits, they've seen a lot of fish, they can be more picky because they've trained themselves to be. So I get more detail orientated as far as what I drop down. So plastic's something you have to use in pressured situations. We talked a little bit about some of the jig options. We could go on for hours as far as that's concerned. Don't throw away spring bobbers. Get the spring bobbers involved in this situation because you're going to miss a lot of bites if you don't, especially if you're hole hopping and it starts to get cold and your hands start to get numb. They don't work as well as far as sensitivity for filling the blank of a rod when a fish hits. Visually seeing the bite will give you the upper hand. It's still amazing to me how many ice anglers are not using spring bobbers or are still trying to beat their chest with the pride thing about tight lining and trying to feel the thing. That's great. If it works exceptionally for you, have at it. But I can tell you from experience, having a spring bobber, you can see a lot of bites, especially that up bite for finicky crappies and bluegills, even bottom hugging perch that come up and just happen. I've seen on my underwater camera from Vexilar how many times a fish comes in, grabs the bait, you don't feel nothing on your rod, the rod tip doesn't move and they spit it back out. With a spring bobber, you see that strike. It gives you an upper hand to set the hook and bring that fish home. So spring bobbers are something you want to learn and want to be using. If you are an angler that uses a float, I'm big with the Ice Buster bobbers. As you can see, this one here trimmed way down to match, and I got it written on there 16th ounce. I write on each one of these Ice Buster bobbers on what this size is going to be the most effective for. I want that bobber to literally sit barely below the surface. I want a half an inch of that bobber above the water, so when a fish bites, it feels the least amount of resistance. I know that when I have a 16th ounce jig on, this bobber is going to do just that. So as you're ripping down your Ice Buster bobbers, don't just reuse another one the next time you go out. Write on there what size it's good for, so next time you're digging around with all the different bits and pieces, it'll say 8th ounce, 16th ounce, 32nd ounce, 100th ounce, whatever you might be using to dictate that type of bobber. So this float system is going to be very good when it comes to finicky fish. So, like I said, the sky's the limit as far as tackle goes. I'm also downsizing for walleyes. We talked about the 16th ounce jigging spoons from Northland Tackle. I use small puppet minnows, Northland Tackle puppet minnow. Very, very small. This is the smallest size. You have jigging wraps, kind of a similar concept. The puppet minnow works very well because it gives you 3 spots to tie onto. You've got 3 different eyes that import 3 different actions. So that's something very, very unique to the puppet minnow and a lot of cool patterns. I've caught a lot of big walleyes on this tiny little 1-inch bait. I've caught crappies, bluegills, perch, same goes for it. So don't be afraid to throw some of those baits on the line. I'm also a big fan of the Salmo Chubby Darter. This is the tiny little number 3, excellent for perch, panfish, walleyes. Even in pressure lakes, I've caught a lot of big bluegills and crappies on this little number 3 Salmo Chubby Darter. So this is something that if you want to throw on a medium light perch rod and just go crazy, don't be afraid if you catch a pike, a bass, a walleye, a bluegill, a crappie, a perch, a trout, doesn't matter what's swimming, they eat this number 3 Salmo Chubby Darter. So again, don't be afraid to change things up. As you can see in this box of chubby darters, I got probably 15 different color patterns. Do I use them all every day? No. Has there been days where I use them all? You bet. So I mean, there's days where you need to quickly change and try different things to figure out what these fish are feeding on. Don't start the day with what you end the day with when it comes to your tackle. Be ready to change. Be ready to adapt if the day comes. So many anglers I talk to at Thornbirds come in and be like, the bite was tough. What were you using? Oh, number 10 Glow Demon. Yeah, what did they try? Did you try anything else? No, that's the tried and true. It always works in this lake. If they don't bite it, then the fish aren't eating. I can promise you the fish are not going to go a full day without putting something in the belly. So try something different that can get these fish, to coach these fish into biting, these fish into biting. So, fishing pressure lakes, let's go back and get our checklist out. Tap tools, get your GPSs out, get your maps out, find these isolated pieces of structure. We talked a little bit about location. Use where the shanty towns as a rule of thumb of where you should be relocating adjacent to that structure, similar piece of structure in a different part of the lake, same depth level, they're suspended at the nearest bottom line, all those sorts of things, shallow water weeds, be aggressive, be willingness to move and find your own fish. It's my number one point is break away from the norm. Do your own thing, blaze your own trail and catch your own fish. I can tell you they're going to be bigger. As far as rods, reels, tackle go, be ready to manipulate your rod so that you can fish it outside. Call us at Thorn Brothers. We'll get the rod in your hand that you want exactly. Match the right reel with it, the right line. Line is very, very critical. You're going to use 2 or 3 pound test line, maybe even 1 pound test line for your panfish in these pressured bodies of water. You can use 4, 5 pound test line for your bigger game fish, whether it be bass and walleye. Pike can get by with 6 or 8. If you need to tie on a tiger wire leader, that's fine. Tackle goes, artificials, we talked about artificials, huge, gotta have it. I'm gonna do a piece here later this winter on artificials. That's gonna be the entire topic, so I'm not gonna jump too far into that right now. But as you know, if you have questions, you can certainly contact me. But fishing pressured bodies of water, pressured success. Be yourself, break away from the crowd, write your own book, be ready to catch fish, have a lot of fun doing it, and fill that auger up and be ready to move. So pressured water, don't be scared of pressured lakes. There's big fish in pressured lakes. I'll put a link down the bottom of the screen for an article I wrote last year for fishing in your backyard, metro area, backyard ice fishing. It really hits on some key points to being successful when it comes to fishing metro waters, because I promise you some of the biggest fish I've caught personally are within 30 minutes of my house. I happen to live in the north suburbs of Minneapolis and Blaine, right next to Thorn Brothers, and I've caught a lot of big fish within 30 minutes. I'm not driving 2-3 hours north. I know our time is very, very precious to us, so if we get 5 hours to fish on a Saturday, we want to catch fish. We don't want to waste most of the day driving. So don't throw away pressured lakes in your area, whether you're fishing in Chicago, whether you're fishing in New York, whether you're fishing Dakotas, like I said, Minnesota, Iowa, Detroit, doesn't matter where it is, find pressured lakes. Break away from the norm, catch your own fish, have some fun, send me some pictures. I want to hear your success stories fishing pressured waters. Otherwise, Matt Johnson here with Trap Talk. Be safe. It's early ice. Please be safe. Go with a buddy. Practice caution. Get your safety picks around your necks. Get the chisel up. Make sure everything's safe. Grab your Cthulhu micro spikes. Put them on your feet so you're not slipping on that glare ice. Have some fun. Catch some fish. Hopefully everyone had a nice Thanksgiving. We're now moving into December. Before I know it, it's going to be Christmas. And ice fishing is going to be full blown. We're going to be driving on the ice before you know it and having lots of fun. So keep in touch. We'll catch you next week. This is Matt Johnson with Trap Talk. Thanks for watching.